lane at Safeway, Jewel Osco, Albertsons, or your local grocery store.
Whenever you're online, Living the Country Life is there too. Like us on Facebook and exchange tips and ideas with people who share your love for the country way of life. Follow us on Twitter at Small Farming for timely news and information. You can also find us on Instagram and Pinterest. See the latest inspired shot from our readers or add a garden tip to your boards. Living the Country Life has all the ideas for your home acreage. Visit us online at livingthecountrylife.com and find us on social media.
Landscape fabrics are designed to prevent weeds from taking over your garden. They work by preventing sunlight from reaching germinating weeds while allowing air, water, and nutrients through to the plants. They come in rolls, and the cost varies depending on the brand and thickness. Kim Kemper is the Vice President of Marketing for the Jobs Company. She says the landscape fabric you buy should match the project you're using it for.
For people who are planting their annual spring flowers for the season, they are going to want to use a lighter weight fabric that's designed to block the weeds for the season for them. They'll cover it with a light covering of mulch, and it will work great for that season because that bed is going to be torn up and replanted. When people are doing something that's a little more of a permanent installation and they're using, let's say, river rock stone, they're going to want a heavier grade fabric that's designed to last longer.
Make sure you prepare the ground properly before laying down the fabric. Remove any debris and existing weeds.
A lot of times people will put down a little bit of like a granular weed retardant. You want to rake that area so that it's smooth and level, and then you'll put your fabric down and adhere it with either fabric pegs or with garden staples. The lighter fabrics tend to do better with a fabric peg, which is a little plastic peg. The heavier fabrics tend to do better with the staple.
At the end of a roll, overlap the next roll a couple of inches so there isn't a gap. Kemper says one thing to remember is that no landscape fabric has 100% weed control 100% of the time. After a year or two, weeds can sprout on top of the fabric layer. Learn more about landscape fabrics and how to use them at livingthecountrylife.com. I'll see you in the country.
Living the Country Life. Ideas and inspiration for your place in the country. You can find more information on today's topic, share your tips, and post photos by visiting us online at livingthecountrylife.com.
Talk 102.3 FM Riverside. KCAA NBCRadioNews.com.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM. NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The Trump administration plans to impose a 5% tariff on goods coming in from Mexico in response to the number of illegal immigrants crossing into the U.S. On Twitter today, President Trump said the tariff will start on June 10th and will gradually increase until the illegal immigration problem is remedied. Attorney General Bill Barr thinks Special Counsel Robert Mueller could have reached a decision on whether President Trump obstructed justice. In an interview with CBS News, Barr said it's unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. Mueller's final report does not exonerate Trump on obstruction. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson is getting a first-hand look at the flooding in the northwest part of the state.
It's hard to imagine the magnitude of the flooding. It is difficult to comprehend. When you see it from the air, the breadth of the flooding.
The governor was joined by members of Arkansas's congressional delegation for a flyover tour to survey the damage done by the historic flooding of the Arkansas River. Speaking in Fort Smith, Hutchinson praised the volunteers for pulling together to help their neighbors. Another deadly suicide bombing reported in Afghanistan.
At least 6 people were killed Thursday when a suicide bomber set off an explosive at a military training center in Kabul. A number of others were injured in the blast as well. Officials say the bomber, who was on foot, set off the explosive after he was refused entry to the training center. No group has claimed responsibility, but the academy has been targeted in the past. Bill Zimpfer, NBC News Radio.
Newly released documents in the Jussie Smollett case show 2 brothers told police that the Empire actor staged the racist and homophobic attack. Abel and Ola Osundaro were questioned by Chicago police on February 13th and confessed that Smollett planned the alleged assault. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
California headline news. Sanitary conditions at the LAPD Central Station in downtown are forcing state inspectors to take action. Cal OSHA spokesperson Frank Polizzi says an inspection found lots of health problems.
Some things Cal OSHA identified were rats and rodents, fleas, roaches, and even flies and gnats, grasshoppers, and mosquitoes.
Cal OSHA is fining LAPD $5,000. At least one officer has been diagnosed with typhoid fever. The log ride at Riverside's Castle Park will remain closed indefinitely, according to the Riverside Press Enterprise. That decision follows an accident that left a woman critically injured. And a major sponsor has pulled its support from the minor league baseball team in Fresno.
Raisin Company Sunmaid says they're no longer partnering with the AAA baseball team after they showed a video which lumped New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with the likes of Kim Jong-un and Fidel Castro.
The Grizzlies have apologized, calling it a terrible error in judgment. Steve Clausen, California News.
They say that if you want to know a person, you should walk a mile in their shoes. Same thing goes for tires. Except Firestone knows it's not just 1 mile, it's many. With the industry-leading 90-day buy and try guarantee, you can test drive our tires for 90 days. Then if you're not fully satisfied with them, we'll refund or replace them for you. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
Conditions apply. See FirestoneTire.com for details.
Change can happen when you choose it. You can choose treatment and change your addiction to opioids. Medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, is a proven treatment for opioid addiction that significantly reduces the rate of relapse. Covered by Medi-Cal, Medicare, and many private insurance plans, MAT is even available through primary care doctors. Choose a proven treatment option that's right for you. Learn more at choosemat.org and choose Change, California.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-298-8662. That's 800-298-8662. 800-298-8662.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends, on this Thursday night. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. As a reminder, you can follow this program on both Facebook and Instagram. Just go to Viewpoint with Father John. We're really thrilled to have you as part of that family, and it is growing, especially on Instagram. I'm really thrilled about that. So join us, catch some of the videos that we put on there, catch some of the neat photos. If those of you have not seen Boo, we've been doing some videos and stuff with Boo. Boo is our sparrow that Gabby and I rescued 2 years ago this month. So she is our 2-year-old baby. She's a beautiful sparrow. She has a healed leg. When we received her as a baby, she had a broken leg. So she's a very important part. So go on Instagram and see what Boo looks like. I think you'll fall in love with her too. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing a false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And brothers and sisters, Viewpoint with Father John is a listener-supported program. You are the ones who keep us on the air each week. So please go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click on the support button, and give what you can. I truly thank you for your support. And also, you'll be glad to know that Dr. John Smith, Elizabeth Preston, and myself on June 22nd are doing a one-day workshop, the Path to Finding Your True Self, and it's for $35. It's going to be in Elizabeth Preston's art studio, and you can go to Viewpoint with Father John, go to the support button, and when you put in for the $35, in the memo just put workshop, and that will be a reservation for that workshop. You want to come to it. Plus, during lunch, there's some great eateries in the area of the art studio, but this is going to be a life-changing one-day retreat workshop. You won't want to miss this. It's worth the $35 and more, and I'm not just saying that because I'm part of it. I'm saying it because I'm working with a couple of really good people. Dr. Smith is a licensed psychotherapist, and Elizabeth Preston, she is a award-winning artist. I'm trying to get my words together here, kids. And she also does creative journaling in a really therapeutic way. In fact, the person who taught the method that she uses will be on the show next week, Lucia. And it's learning to write with both your dominant and non-dominant hands. What's so important about that? What's important about that is you get to different parts of your subconscious mind by getting into those different areas that the different sides represent. So it'll be a great experience. There'll be some time to learn about self-forgiveness. There'll be time about where we'll learn where we get in our way for our goals and where we want to be in life. So it's a powerful workshop. So be sure to go to Viewpoint with Father John, the member page there on Facebook, and click for the workshop, and you'll get more information there. Then also, please pay in advance because we do have limited seating. We can only bring in 20 to 25 people, and that's it. Because we also want to have time for people who want to talk to each one of us individually, and that will allow us to do it. It'll go from 10 in the morning to between 2:30 and 3 in the afternoon, depending on how big of a lunch we all have and how sleepy we are. So, also, I'd like to invite you to buy a copy of my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. The premise of this book is that we are all God's children, and that we don't need any more self-improvement. Rather, what we need is self-discovery. Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores. So get your copy today. And you know, it's not too early to start shopping for Christmas or Hanukkah. You know, I understand Home Depot and Lowe's are already putting up their Christmas decorations, you know. I know, I'll get some letters for that. It's just a joke, kids. Rule 62, don't take yourself so darn serious. So that's things coming up. And again, I want to encourage you to get a hold of the book, and I'm thrilled that I just got booked on another retreat at Sarah Retreat House for 2020, believe it or not. I believe it's the last weekend of July of next year, 26th to the 28th, I believe are the correct dates that Father Mel sent me. So if you're a male, and particularly if you're involved with 12-step recovery, this is the focus of this retreat. By all means, get registered at Sarah Retreat in Malibu, and I'm thrilled. It's a 3-day retreat. I'm honored to be asked to do another retreat for them. It's a great group up there, good Franciscans. Tonight, I'm really excited because what we've decided to do, we and my multiple personalities, is that about every 3 months we'll do a show where we don't have a guest. Instead, I'll take an aspect of biblical teaching and highlight it and help us understand what it meant during the time when Jesus gave this teaching and where he drew some of this from, which can be really informative, but also good news about what it means for us. So tonight's show we're calling Good News on Good News. And because that's what gospel means, it's good news. And, you know, the way it's been presented for the last 500 years doesn't seem like good news. It seems like we have a God with an anger issue and one that doesn't practice God's own law. What do I mean by that? Well, Jesus said to us when asked for forgiveness, should I forgive 7 times? And he says, no, 7 times 70. In other words, in the Hebrew culture, that means infinity. You never stop forgiving. But yet, in one lifetime, which is very short when you look at eternity, God doesn't forgive us for things that we do. Isn't there something a little wrong with that? There is. And part of it is a misunderstanding of Scripture. And I really want to emphasize this. I know some of the listeners who've been with us since this show started. You've heard me say this multiple times, but it bears repeating. Jesus did not come to change God's mind about us. Jesus came to change our mind about God. Because in that time, in the world setting, it was believed that all gods were angry. All gods. Okay? And what the people did at that time was they spent their time doing sacrifices and trying to appease the gods so that they would have good crops, so that their families would be healthy, so that their children would marry wisely. And what that means is that when they're doing the negotiations, because marriage was not based on love, but based on business, that if the gods were angry with you, it was going to be a bad deal. You wouldn't get enough rain for your crops. You marry into disastrous families for the business deals that marriage was, because it was about business, not romance at that time. And so when we look at it 2,000 years later, we think, wow, boy, that's something else. So the idea of this God that's created in love, creates out of love, and adores what God creates, that was a new concept. Because most of the beliefs about God at that time was that the world came out of violence, that two gods were fighting each other. One was male, the other was female. And one god put the smack down on the other, cut them in half, used half the body for the heavens and the other half for the earth. Now, this is metaphorical, of course. Okay, this is not meant to be literal. And one of the problems with biblical translation these days, or interpretation, is too many people try to take something that was metaphorical and make it literal, and that's why it doesn't work. And that's how we wound up with this seemingly angry God that can't be appeased, but yet tells us to be more loving. In fact, makes us more loving than God would be. So that helps point to what some of the problem is. Now, in our Jewish brothers and sisters, the way that Genesis came about, which is a love poem, it's a poem. Okay, it's not historical. It was never meant to be historical. And when people try to make it historical, that's why they get in so much trouble. But even the beginning of it, the engine behind this God is love, not violence. And really what's kind of neat is what made Judaism so different than the other religions is all religions were tribal. And one kingdom would fight with another kingdom, and whoever kingdom won, their God was stronger than the other God. Well, the God of Isaac, of Jacob, of Abraham, he says, I'm going to do something different. Now, when we say his, remember, it was a male population or dominance at that time for the way the system was set up. So, if you have problems with God being masculine, that's okay. God is, neither male nor female, yet both at the same time. But we like to have something to identify with. So now we've covered that. So here's this God that says, your tribe's going to be different. Your tribe is going to bless all other tribes. That was a novel concept in religion. Because instead of going out and conquering other kingdoms and proving that we had the best tribe and the best God, our job at the prompting of our God was to go out and bless others and do things with love, practice hospitality. So there's a lot here. And so we're going to come a minute early to our first commercial break because I don't want to interrupt the middle of this because this is very important stuff. So in 2 minutes and 2 seconds, we'll be back. But continue with us because this is really good news on good news. You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
Attention all business owners, join C's Candies, Big Lots, Dollar Tree, and Sola Salon Studios at the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands. Availability is now open for your company, whether that be restaurants, retail, or more. Located between Alabama and the Tennessee exits where the 10 and the 210 meet in Redlands. The Tri-City Shopping Center is zoned for multi-use. Call today and schedule your appointment. Ask for Chris Beauchamp or John Jennings, 951-684-4400. That number again, 951-684-4400. The Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands, the mall with a heart.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And by the way, this does go over on YouTube. Some of you are watching on Ustream right now, which I thought was an appointment with my urologist when I first heard it, but it's something else. But anyhow, you can always see all of our shows. If you go to Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA on YouTube, you can get all of our old shows. Also, you can go to KCAAradio.com, and they archive every show we do. Just press on the show, and it'll show you where you can download it, MP3. But you can't see my pretty smiling face unless you go to YouTube. So, I'll see you on YouTube. And tonight, I want to put a little shout out to our engineer, Frank. How you doing tonight, Frank? I didn't mean to wake you up. I'm sorry.
I was having a great nap, too.
I know. He's wearing this Kitten on the Keys T-shirt, and I had to tell him where that came from, and he looked at me like, you are really, really old. So he's been dissing me all night. So those of you who really have sympathy for me, please write letters to Frank and let him know to be loving.
I would love to hear them.
I love to hear them. Well, it's good to have you here tonight, Frank, and thanks for being here. He's our sound engineer now, so if you don't like the way this show sounds or something I say, I'm always subject of the engineer, so blame Frank. I just read this stuff. So anyhow, when we left, we were talking a little bit about the Old Testament, about Genesis, and what made this so different, that instead of having a God that wanted sacrifices, this was a God that wanted us to bless others. That was the sacrifice God wanted from us. This was really tangible. And for the first time, it was the idea of a God that cared about creation and didn't just want to get things from the created. That was really, really different back then. So, what does that have to do with what we're doing now? Well, all that's very important to lead up to where we get with Jesus, because Jesus is Jewish. Jesus never stopped being Jewish. Jesus loved being Jewish. And Jesus and the Christ are two different things. A lot of people don't know that. They think Christ is Jesus' last name. It's not. The proper way to say it is Jesus the Christ. Okay? And Jesus taught things that were a different interpretation on what we call the Old Testament, what they call the Torah. So I'm going to get into some of that now, because this is really good news for people like you and people like me, because this changed everything. It took the power from the top down and put it from the bottom up. And it was really scandalous. It's still scandalous. It's so scandalous we still have trouble believing it. So instead, we replace what Jesus taught with rules because it's so scandalous to actually love everybody, not just members of your tribe. Good heavens. That is incredible news. So let me give you some examples of that. Okay? When you are a Jewish young man, unfortunately they didn't do this with young women. Okay? Don't blame me. I wasn't there. Okay? Call your local rabbi and ask him why it happened. I don't know. I'm going to get in trouble for that, I know, as soon as I get back to Claremont. So anyhow, when you were a young man, young boy, and you went to Hebrew school, and you would study the Torah, we're not talking about necessarily reading it, we're talking about memorizing it. Up until the age 12, you memorized the first 5 books, the Talmud, word for word. Now, when you reached the age of reason, which they believe was about age 12, if you were the best of the best, you went on to memorize the rest of the Bible, or the Old Testament, the Pentateuch. And so, if you were the best of the best of the best there, Harvard, Yale, International Reform University, sorry, I had to throw that in there, California Christian University, sorry, I was required. But anyhow, if you're the best of the best, you would then go to a rabbi and ask him to take on his yoke. What does that mean? Because you heard Jesus say, take on my yoke, it's easy. Well, the yoke meant that you could do things the way of the rabbi. You can teach the way that that rabbi also taught. And so what would happen is the rabbi would grill you. He'd ask you questions. He would talk to you for a while. It was a lengthy process. And at the end of it, he would either say, yes, I believe that you can do what I do, the way that I do it. You may take on my yoke. And you became his disciple. However, he may also say to you, I can see that you love God very much, but you're not going to be a rabbi. I don't believe you can do what I do. Go and ply your family trade, and maybe you have a son that will be a rabbi, but you don't have what it takes to do what I do. So, that being said, here comes Jesus, because people ask, why did James and John and all the others leave what they were doing and just follow Jesus? When he says, come follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. Or you open H Salt Fish and Chips or something. And so here comes Jesus coming down the street, or down the beach, as we say in my generation, bebopping down the road. And here's James and John plying the family trades. What does that mean? Well, fathers were fishermen, so they're out helping fathers. It meant they didn't make the cut. They weren't the best of the best. They were plying their family trade. And Jesus says to them, come with me, I'll make you fishers of men. He called them as disciples. This is a big deal. I can just see Zebedee, the father of James and John, going home that night to his wife and saying to her, do you notice who's not with me? Do you see the boys are not here? They're with the rabbi. The rabbi, he says, come with me. And the next day, he would be in the town center, and all of his friends would be there, and he'd be speaking really loud so everybody could hear. He said, you notice my sons are not with me? Do you know why my sons are not with me? They're going to be rabbis. The rabbis called him. The Rabbi Yeshua called him. Be very proud. And why is that good news for you and me? The reason why that's good news for you and me is these were not the best of the best. They were plying the family trade. They were told, you can't do this. You don't have what it takes to do it. And Jesus saw something different. Jesus said to them, I believe you can do what I do. These weren't scholars. These are people who would be what we would call C students. D students if you went to Chaffee. And so, and he's calling them to go with him. This was astonishing. This was unheard of. And it was a huge thing a huge honor for the disciples, for James and John and the rest. And something else is going on here, which is so important, is the fact that he had such confidence in these people that had no confidence in themselves. It was life-changing for them. Life-changing for them. What does that mean? It means that God has more belief in us than we have in God. And that God is more for us than we are for God. So here comes Jesus. He brings them along. And he's telling them, you can do these things. Even at one point he says, these things I have done, you shall do, and far greater things shall you do. Now, when you're a disciple, you follow your rabbi everywhere. Even into the latrine, as we guys who've been around the military say. That's the restroom for those of you who don't know military talk. And it's true. They would follow, because they want to do everything like their rabbi. And the rabbi would come out of the stall and say, blessed be God who makes holes for us to evacuate through. I mean, they really would say stuff like that. These were wild people. They were great. They were wonderful teachers because they made it exciting. And you'd be walking, because you walked everywhere. They didn't have the Cadillacs yet. And so you walked everywhere. And the rabbi would stop. And he would see a bush with a beautiful flower. He'd say, blessed be God who supplies such beauty that we may rejoice in the very creation that he has given us. Now, does that sound like an angry God? Does that sound like a God that's not for us? I'm going to digress just a minute. One of the most misunderstood stories in the Bible, and there's many of them, but one of the greatest misunderstood stories is Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm going to explain that right now. And that's why I wanted to wait till after the commercial break to bring that in, because this is very important that you don't miss any part of this. Sodom and Gomorrah was not about homosexuality. Now, I'm hearing people rattle their dishes already because, what? I've always been told. I'm giving you some theological fact here. In the Hebrew language, there is no word for homosexuality. It's not even known of. So you're saying, well, what about all the stuff that took place between armies? Yes, that was a military thing that when one army defeated another army, the one army who won would sodomize the party that lost. And it had nothing to do with sexuality. It had to do with taking away their dignity. It's a way of saying, I own you. You have nothing left. And then they would take the wife and children. If they didn't kill them, oftentimes they would kill them. But they would do this to take away their dignity. Now let's get back to Sodom and Gomorrah. The problem with Sodom and Gomorrah is they refused to practice Jewish hospitality. Now remember earlier I talked about what made Judaism different was this: God said, you're going to be a tribe that blesses all other tribes, which requires you to practice hospitality. Whoever comes your way, you welcome them into your home. You give them food. You give them a place to rest. You give them water to wash themselves. Because again, they're out in the desert. They come in, their feet are dirty, their hair is dirty, so you give them water to wash with so that they can get the dust off of them so they can have a meal. And there's another part of that I'll go into at another time about where Jesus uses that information as well to teach with. So, the angels go to tell the people of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Leviticus that God wants them to practice the hospitality because they've been abusing people and just throwing them out. And of course, this is not a historical thing. It's allegorical, because you have the angel bargaining with God. Now, this is how you know it's a truly Jewish story, because they're bargaining, and it's part of the culture to barter, or to bicker back and forth, and come up with a good price. So he says, "What if I find 100?" The angel talking to God, 100 people who are holy people. No. And you get all the way down to, if we find one righteous person, will you spare this place? And God says, okay, one righteous person. They couldn't find it there, right? So he sends the angels to go talk to the people and say, look, you got to do this. You got to practice hospitality. So what do? They beat up the angels, they sodomize them, and kick them out. And remember earlier I said that's what one army did to another. It had nothing to do with sexual orientation. It had to do with they refused to practice Jewish hospitality. They beat the messengers up. That's what an angel is. It's a messenger. Beat them up, sodomized them to take away their dignity, and then kicked them down the road. That's what the problem was. The refusal to practice compassion and hospitality. That's what Leviticus was about. All these years later, people are talking about, well, God was against homosexuality. Even the idea of man shall not lay with man, the idea was you don't take another man's dignity. You don't rob him of his self-esteem. It wasn't, and when it says it's an abomination, what that means is it's outside our liturgical practices. That's what that line means. And that's why it's important to know the background of the Bible and not just hands on the Bible, say read it, the Holy Spirit will make it clear to you. That's not true. It's really a terrible thing to do to somebody. You know, if you want to learn Chinese and you don't speak Chinese, why don't you grab a Chinese book and have the Holy Spirit make it all clear what the Chinese book is saying? Now, that sounds ridiculous when I say it, doesn't it? What makes you think the Bible's different? Look, if you think God's going to do the whole thing, and some of you kids have heard me say this before, you know, why don't you lock yourself in a closet, pray for a hot dog, and see if God sticks it to the keyhole? God's happy for you to have the hot dog. But God expects you to do your part. Our part is studying this stuff. I went to school for a long time to learn what I learned. And as many of the traditional clergy do, we go to school for a long time. So that when we pass down this information, we can give you a little background on it to help you understand what we're talking about. So here comes Jesus. I told you it's going to go different directions a little bit tonight, but it all comes together, I promise. So here we have Jesus, who takes the people who are not the best of the best of the best of the best, makes them his disciples. And then he does something even worse than that. He allows women to be disciples. That there was enough to get him strung up. That was such a cultural faux pas. You just didn't do that. Jesus did. Jesus was the first to stand up for women's rights and women's worth. That's good news. We still haven't gotten that lesson yet. And that's why women don't make as much money as men do. And that's why men are still telling women what to do, because we haven't learned that lesson that there are equal, not substandard to us. God is equally expressed in male and female alike. Different but the same. And when I say different but the same, do enjoy the differences we have between male and female. One of the problems I'm having with society right now is the fact that we're trying to make everything one. It's not meant to be. Rejoice in how you're made. If God created you a woman or a man, straight, gay, bisexual, whatever God made you, God knew what God was doing when God made you. And God made you with love. That's what this good news is. If you notice, not once in all four Gospels does Jesus say anything about sexual orientation. Not once. You know what he does talk a lot about? Abusing people with scripture, with rules, with laws, with social status, with not being good to strangers, with not being kind to enemies. So, you know, this is a whole different thing. This is why I'm saying it's good news about good news. I truly believe something that Richard Rohr says. And Richard Rohr is one of my heroes. Those of you who know me know that's true. I don't want to say I'm addicted to his writings, but I've only read 27 of his books. There's still a couple I haven't read, for heaven's sake, so I'm not addicted to his books. I'm not a Richard Rohraholic. I had to do that for Frank. So anyhow, but what Richard Rohr says, Father Rohr says, is that 2,000 years from now, people are going to look back and say that Christianity in our time is still in its infancy. Why? Because we still haven't gotten the message. The message is about kindness. The message is about compassion, welcoming the stranger. It's about learning how to love. It's about finding out that God has loved you the entire time. And when we come back from commercial break, we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about God having more faith in us than we have in God. So again, you're tuned to Viewpoint with Father John on KCAA Radio, and we'll be back in 2 and 2.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
KCAA Radio is proud to announce that the Tri-City Center in Redlands is our new home. We're fortunate to be located among some of the best businesses in the region. Among our neighbors are Ray Chiropractic, Brace Connection Orthodontist, Pain Solutions Medical Massage, Rent-A-Center, MVP Staffing Agency, Jenny Craig, Salon Centric, and many more. The Tri-City Shopping Center is located just off the I-10 between Alabama and the Tennessee exits in Redlands. The Tri-City Center is the mall with a heart.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM. What station are we on? We're on KCAA Radio on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. And I just can't get through this tonight. You know what? I see, you took away my sacrificial wine, and I'm just no good. I mean, yeah, without my Thunderbird, I can't talk. So it's an Irish thing. Anyhow, welcome back. And I'm sorry I can't even tell you what station I'm on anymore. I mean to. A reminder that on the 22nd of next month, I can't believe that's so close now, Dr. John Smith, Elizabeth Preston, and myself, we're doing a one-day workshop in the People's Republic of Claremont, California. It goes from 10 a.m. to 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon, depending on what our question and answer period will be like. It's only $35. You can go to Viewpoint with Father John on Facebook, and you'll see the event there, and it will take you where you can click on the link there, and it'll take you where you can pay for your seat there and get registered. You can RSVP there. So please come to this thing. You'll really be glad you did. I'm really thrilled to be working with such talented people who bring a lot of talent to the table and a lot of information and good sense, just plain good sense. So when we left, I said we were going to talk a little bit about this concept of God believing more in us than we do ourselves. Let me give you an example. We know about when the disciples are on the boat and there's kind of rough seas going on, but Jesus has stayed behind on shore. And then they look up and they see Jesus walking on the water towards them. They're terrified. Now, during biblical times, water was terrifying to our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith. Well, and many of that area too, but many cultures at that time. Water was very mysterious. That's why you hear so many things about water, like the Great Flood, things like that, sea monsters. It was because they were very afraid. It was mysterious. And they just didn't know because it was so deep and what kind of things happen in there. And they believed that ghosts actually can come in and out of the water. So here they see Jesus walking towards them on the water. They're terrified. They think he's a ghost. And we all know the line where he says, "Be not afraid, it is I." And so Peter says, because he knew Jesus wouldn't ask him to do anything that Jesus didn't believe he could do. Remember, when you're following a rabbi, the rabbi believes you can do everything that they're doing. So he says, "Teacher, if it is you, command me to come to you." And he says, "Peter, come." And so Peter steps out of the boat, begins to walk on the water, gets a few feet, realizes what he's doing, becomes afraid, and sinks. One of the shortest lines in the Bible is, "Help me." And so Jesus reaches out, pulls him up, and says, "Oh, ye of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, here's where it's been misunderstood for all these years in current time. Now, they understood this back then, but because we've kind of forgotten our roots, we missed out on the fact what Jesus was really saying is not, "Why did you doubt me?" Jesus was saying, "Why did you doubt you?" See, Peter knew Jesus would not ask Peter to do anything that Jesus did not absolutely believe that Peter could do. So when Jesus said to him, "Come to me, walk on the water," Jesus knew that Peter could do it. And for a few seconds, Peter knew that he could do it because he knew Jesus believed in him. But he got out a little bit and it was beyond where his subconscious was, as we say today. And he became afraid and he started to sink. Now, Jesus didn't call him an idiot. He says, "Ye of little faith, why didn't you believe?" And what he meant is, why didn't you believe in yourself? I believe in you. Now that's good news. Jesus believed in Peter more than Peter believed in Peter. And so Jesus is telling him, look, you can do this. You can do this. And also later we hear him say, "These things I have done, you shall do, and far greater things shall you do than I have done." This is powerful stuff. And so when he's commissioning these people, the ones who are not the best of the best of the best, well, that means he's commissioning people like you and people like me. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not the best of the best of the best. And I've shared this on the show a few times, and those of you who've read my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me, have read this in the book. It's a very personal story about when I was celebrating Mass with my bishop at the time, very kind man. And we're in his private chapel. There's only room for about 10 people there. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term concelebrating, what it means is I'm helping do the Mass. We're taking, turns doing the prayers, helping to serve the Eucharist, which is the communion. Well, while he was preaching, I'm looking at this beautiful painted picture of Jesus holding a little embryo in his hand, and the love that was captured by this artist of Jesus looking at this little baby in his palm of his hand. Well, I got lost in that. And then suddenly, I said to the fiber of my being that I was not called into the priesthood out of virtue. Rather, God said, in spite of your iniquities, I can use you to love. It was so prophetic, I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even finish the Mass. All I could do is sit there and weep. I couldn't even go up for communion. The bishop brought communion back to me, and I couldn't finish the Mass. Like I said, I couldn't speak. I had tears just flowing down my face. And they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of humility. I realized I didn't earn the priesthood, and it finally dawned on me what so many of my professors said to me in seminary, which is the caller doesn't make the priest. And so after the Mass, my superior left me there in the chapel by myself for about an hour, hour and a half. And he then later came and checked on me to see if I was all right. And I very feebly tried to explain to him what took place, and I still really can't put it into words. How can you verbalize an experience, an actual experience with God? You can't. It's beyond words. And so I very feebly tried to tell him what I was experiencing, and he looked at me and said, "Ah, you had the Christ experience. You've now gone from being ordained to being a priest." And he grabbed me, this big Lebanese man, and held me, and we both bawled like a couple of babies. You see, he'd had this experience too. What does it have to do with what we're talking about tonight? See, I'm a street rat, kids. I grew up, I've been on my own since I was 14. And I know what it was to be homeless. I wasn't the smartest kid in school. I'm dyslexic. I really do see things backwards. Yet God said, in spite of your iniquities, I can use you to love. Now, if God will do that with a street rat like me, someone who didn't get there out of virtue, someone who seized every opportunity to make a mistake that came my way, and I've made a lot of mistakes, believe me, and yet God has been kind enough to allow me to serve. I can't put into words how humbling that is. Because, again, this is what we call grace, a free gift, a gift that's not earned. And while I went to school, I certainly did the footwork. The priesthood was a gift. And to me, it's the pearl of great price I would never want to lose. And God doesn't just do that with me. God calls you. God uses the most unlikely people. Case in point, I'll prove that point right now. Look at Moses, the leader of God's people. And who is Moses? He's a murderer on the run. He's a fugitive. He committed murder, and rather than standing up and taking responsibility for what he did, he splits. And he's running away. And yet God says, I'm just saying this, I'm paraphrasing, taking a little license on the scripture here. He says, in spite of your iniquities, I can use you to love my people and take them out of Pharaoh's hands. This is good news. That means God is interested in you specifically. That you were created in love. Let me give you another example. I know you have trouble believing this, but some cultures have trouble with other cultures. They believe they're superior. If you don't believe that, look at what we're dealing with right now in America, where a certain part of our population believes that they're superior to other parts of the population and think that others shouldn't have the same rights that they have. Well, this isn't new. Jesus dealt with that as well. And so here's Jesus. He's out, and there's a Samaritan woman at the well that Jacob gave them. Now that means it's a holy place. And the Samaritans were not people who were liked by the Israelites. They were considered despised people. They said a lot of things that were very unkind. I'm not going to say on the air because I don't like to pay fines to the FCC. Just know it was really degrading. So what does Jesus do? I want you to listen to this very carefully. He starts talking to the woman at the well. Asks her for water. This was such a social faux pas. You didn't do this. First of all, men didn't talk to women, particularly if they were married women. And if you're Jewish, you really didn't talk to Samaritan women. I mean, he almost lost his disciples right there. They almost left. This was such a terrible thing that he did. It breaks everything that says that you're a polite Jew. And he did it anyhow. But let's go further. What makes this even greater news is Jesus talks to her and then talks about the relationship, and she says she didn't have a husband. She says, you're right that you haven't had a husband. You've had 5. And the man you're living with now, what we say in my generation, shacking with, isn't your husband. Now, he didn't condemn her. He loved her. He healed her. He gave her her dignity. Did you hear that? He gave her her dignity. That's beautiful. How many people in the religious world do we say, well, they don't belong? They're not good enough to join our church. They have to go before the board to find out if they're able to be a member of our fellowship. Boy, that goes absolutely against what Jesus did. Jesus just took someone who he's not even supposed to talk to. And he loves her and he heals her life. And she goes and tells the other people, and they all come and spend time with him. These people are supposed to have nothing to do with the Jews, and Jews nothing to do with them. And he makes them a new community. That's powerful. That means every one of us count. And Jesus continued to break these barriers and taking it further and further and further to make it clear. God does not have stepchildren. I'm going to take you to another part of the gospel to prove this point even further. A lot of people know about when Jesus went into the temple and he turned the tables over on the money changers and people selling the doves and stuff. Do you know why Jesus was angry and why he took the cords and made whips out of them? Well, in the temple, there was a place for the Jewish people to pray, and there was supposed to be a place for the Samaritans. And the money changers set up their booths and stuff where the Samaritans were supposed to be able to pray so that they couldn't go pray. And Jesus would have nothing to do with it. And that's why he called it a den of thieves. They were robbing people of their dignity and robbing them of the ability to worship in a way that is meaningful to them and to pray to the place that was blessed for them to pray in. And Jesus says, no, God has nothing to do with that. God loves all these people. So, this is supposed to be a teaching about love, a teaching about healing lives. One more. Let's talk about the adulteress. She wasn't a prostitute. That was a bad translation later. The adulteress who was caught in the act, and they're getting ready to stone her. Now, keep in mind, they only stoned the woman. Seems to me that there's two involved with adultery. Otherwise it's just, like most of my Saturday nights when I was a teenager, all alone. Okay, so they're going to stone her. And, of course, Jesus is doing something really kind of neat, which I don't have time to get into now because we're coming down to the last 5 minutes, but he leans down and starts writing in the dirt. And one night I went to a whole show just on what he's writing in the dirt because it was significant. Very significant. And the people around there knew what that was about. But that's for another day. But he says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, nobody can throw a stone because everybody has made mistakes. And so they're all leaving. He's taking the fun out of it. So the only ones there is the woman and Jesus. Now, I can hardly tell this part without filling up with tears because it means so much to me. Because this was my aha moment of how deep God's love goes. So Jesus says to the woman, "Woman, now where are your accusers?" And she says, "No, Lord, just you." And he says to her, "No, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." What does that mean, go and sin no more? Does that mean be perfect and never making mistakes? No, it means you don't have to live this way anymore. I'm healing your life. I love you right where you are, and because I love you, you're not going to have to do this anymore. You're worth more. So he didn't punish her, make her feel bad. He didn't say, you know what, you've sure been a real stinker, and I should let him stone you. He didn't. He said, neither do I condemn you. And that's a little bit of what I got in that chapel that very special day when I could no longer speak because I was so moved by God's love, was neither do I condemn you. Brothers and sisters, I don't know about you, but through my life there's been many things I've held against myself that I thought I could never forgive myself for. Just mistakes being human, because we're all human. That's as high as we get on this platform is human. And
through the love of some spiritual directors and some friends that I hold sacred to my heart, I learned how to forgive some of those places. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about in the workshop, by the way, is self-forgiveness. So Jesus was teaching her she's lovable. God hasn't given up on her. Brothers and sisters, God hasn't given up on you. And if God hasn't given up on you, well, who are you to give up on you? And if God has forgiven you, well, who are you to not forgive you? Are you better than God? And I don't say that to be mean. I say that for you to think about. You are loved. You are not a mistake. I don't care how you were conceived. You were conceived because God said, I want to express my love in you and through you. And so right there is just the beauty, the good news of the good news. Alan Watts talked about that we are, each one of us, an individual of everything that's happening in the universe, the great creation. We're connected to all of it. Jesus was saying the same thing. We're all connected. And that's why he was nonviolent. Why he said, love your enemies. Why he said to welcome strangers. Why he said to heal the sick and to feed the poor. To take care of the widows and the children. Brothers and sisters, Jesus brings us good news. What are we going to do with it? Are we just going to say, well, let's just worship God? Let's just worship Jesus, which he never said to do. Or we're going to follow what Jesus taught us to do, which is to love one another. It doesn't matter what religion you are or lack thereof. You are created according to our holy scriptures, and each religion has holy scriptures, and each one of them is holy. It is a mistake to say that ours is holy and theirs isn't. But all holy texts talks about we are made of love, and we're supposed to love each other. So I hope this night has been informative to you, that you really found some good news in the good news. And we'll come back in about 3 months and do this again. Next week I have Lucia coming as my guest, who is a great author. And I'm very excited to have her. And then she has an event coming up the following Saturday. And so thank you again for spending this evening with me. And for, if no one's told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. And hopefully you'll be here again next week on Viewpoint with Father John. God bless.
KCAA Loma Linda. Listen on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.